G'day everybody and welcome to episode 6 of the Hoop Tales podcast. Great guest with us today, current CEO and a bit of a legend of the club, Peter Eddy. Pete, thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, good morning. Pleasure to be here, Ryan.
Terrific. So obviously, Pete, I've been asking every guest that's jumped on sort of what their life's been like during this whole COVID crisis, and I suppose what's life like been for you?
This has been a really funny year for me, I suppose. Initially, my plans, obviously in retiring this year, my plans were some long service leave, heading overseas for 9 weeks, and then a few other jobs, and not winding back leading into retirement, but probably just taking some leave, making sure things finished on a positive note. And after last year, which was a really good and strong recovery year, and we had 3 major projects, on the verge of getting underway this year. Then to be hit with COVID was really a challenge. So I suppose in that sense, it's not what I expected, and it has been a little frustrating. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of people doing it a lot tougher than I am, and I think we've just got to stick at it and get through it.
Absolutely. So obviously, we've got Neville, new CEO, moving in. We've obviously pretty much moved over to BSEC now. All our comps running over there, stadiums up and running. Did that put a bit of a spanner in the works? Obviously, our first year at BSEC sort of being pretty much last year, and now having this year, and we had nationals obviously planned and things like that. Obviously, it's organisations supposed to take a little bit of a hit in terms of what this year was supposed to look like for us. What do you think about sort of all of that and how the years sort of turned out for us?
Look, definitely, it's certainly a significant setback in the sense that this year was all geared up. Last year was moving into BSEC and finding our feet, and that was overwhelming in itself, just moving to such a big centre and such a big space and managing power bills and practical things. But this year was very much around, getting the Vixens in. We had a sold-out game the start of this year. We had to cancel. We had a national or 2 national championships, including the Wheelchair Cup. We had a number of state events lined up as well as our own tournament. So it was really geared to be a really positive introduction. And I probably feel sorry particularly for Mark Valentine and for the team around BSEC operations, because it was really their chance to showcase. And it was also a chance for us to generate some income into the business from other areas, and probably tick that off before we moved on to some other projects. Whereas now what's happened is we're really in a pause mode. A lot of the things we wanted to do this year, we can't do till next year. And even then, we're probably looking at mid next year to 2021 to bring back some of those big events that we had planned.
Definitely. All right, Pete, so what we're going to do now is just obviously have a bit of a chat to the listeners, I suppose, about how basketball sort of started for you, how you sort of got into the line of work being a CEO, what did you study and things like that, and sort of your journey to becoming the CEO of Basketball Ballarat.
Yeah, it was a pretty unusual and just, I suppose, random development as time went on. And really getting into the sport, I was in the era of playing at the old YMCA in Camp Street. So I actually moved to the Minor Dome as a player in maybe under 14, under 16, when we had 2 courts here. And this was the biggest thing since sliced bread, getting into a brand new facility in Ballarat in the late 60s, that was. So really different generation, different era, but equally exciting moving into the Minor Dome then as for people moving into BSEC today. So I suppose I've always had that passion for the sport. I've played other sports as well. As I moved through to probably later teen years, I realised I was never going to be a superstar, and I wasn't going to be a tall superstar at that. So, while loving the game socially and playing, I certainly turned my interest to coaching, and nearly by default to administration, just getting involved with a group of mates to play in a single team in a social comp really started the ball rolling. And from that single group, which was united in the first era, today that club Celtic Tigers. So really the generation of starting a club, then being involved for many years as it merged with other clubs and grew, and also developed a strategy plan for being a strong club into the future. that was probably my first introduction to sports management, and clearly from day one I loved it. I really enjoyed the the organisational side of the sport that really became my strength. So I ultimately moved away from, I suppose, coaching and more into the management and administration side of the sport, both with the club and then with the association. And I was in that role for probably 15 years as a volunteer.
Wow.
While I was doing that, I'd obviously gone through my secondary education. I deferred uni for a year and decided to take a job in the Australian Public Service, and never went back to uni. I stayed there 13 years and then realised that it wasn't quite what I wanted to do in life. And all that time I'd been involved with obviously management and sports administration. A left field turn, I went into the Golf House Hotel as a licensee and operated in that environment. Maxine and I were in the hotel. When we moved out of the hotel industry, and our daughter Jess was only very young at that stage, when we moved out, I really had no idea what I wanted to do, but I did know that I had a passion for sport. Thought about going back to uni at that stage, and the irony of that was that decided at the time I didn't think I'd get any more clients by starting a sports management company with uni, given that it was very much you had to pay for it as you went in that era. The irony being the next year I became a lecturer in the subjects I would have been sitting in. So it was a bit of a unique experience in that way, but it does teach you that your own skills and development in life, in that era, you could do. Certainly today, tertiary education and higher education, a variety of things is essential, but in that era, you probably had a little more flexibility. And hence I had a sports management business working across the Ballarat East Rec Centre. The association was a client. The Miners, which were a separate company in that era, were a client. Sport and Rec, the City of Ballarat. So I did bits and pieces, and it was really as the association evolved and grew that I needed to make a decision whether to stay here with the association full time, particularly with the introduction of the gaming industry, or whether to move away from the association and keep my sports management business. It was a pretty simple decision. I was really, this is my hobby. I've been here since I was 15 or 16 as a volunteer, a player, an administrator. So in all that era, I just made the decision this was my future. And so I then wound down my own sports management business and became here as a full-time contractor to the association, probably in the early 90s. So, I have been here a long time. Right now, and this was our primary objective, we met with the clubs at the start of this year, and we acknowledge that the last 3 or 4 years has been really hard because we've been overstretched with our resources. We've had a lot of focus on getting funding, then building. But this year was to be the year we refocus on our domestic and our association programs and services. And disappointingly, we haven't got as far as we would like. That said, that commitment hasn't changed, and I'm sure the association moving forward will have a really strong focus on, now that we've got a better suite of facilities on track and in the pipeline, I think we can go a way forward with enhancing the experience for our members. Whether that member is a D or C grade level player at any junior or senior age, or whether they're elite players, shouldn't matter. The experience has got to be there for everyone.
Great. Yeah, that's terrific, Pete. That's awesome. All right, so now we're going to move on to a segment called Get to Know Me, and a special shout out to McCafe Ballarat, the official coffee for us here at Basketball Ballarat. So what we've got here, Pete, is actually, Pete, I think, you had a coffee there before, didn't you?
I did, Matt. I'm guilty now. I have got one right in front of me.
No, we love to see it. We love to see it. All right, so what I've got, Pete, is I've got about 7 questions here, and they're just questions for the listeners to have a chance to get to know you a little bit better. All right, so question 1, favourite holiday destination?
Sunshine Coast, Queensland.
Love that. Second favourite sport?
AFL football, Richmond.
Richmond, yeah, we can see the Tigers flag in the background there too. Yep. Favourite WNBL team?
Boomers.
Favourite NBL team?
That's a difficult one. I've got to say Melbourne United.
There we go, yep.
I love the fact that we've got 2 teams in Melbourne though.
Yep. Biggest setback you've faced?
I'd nearly say this year, the COVID virus. I just think in a way, I'm glad I was still here. I think having my experience and the capacity to have been through some challenges in the past probably at least allowed the association to react very quickly. But this is probably the biggest challenge I've ever faced professionally. And even personally to a degree, because it affects so many people that you're involved with. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Name an achievement of yours.
It's always a tough one, and I hate getting asked it. Probably in very early days to be recognised as the Citizen of the Year for Ballarat City Council. And that was about just recognition of community engagement and involvement. And this goes back many, many years before we have the profile we've got today. But that really meant a lot to me at the time, just because, you felt you were doing good work, and it just reinforced that. And I think actually drove me to do, more in the community sense as time went on.
Terrific. And last one, most prized possession.
My family. Clear cut.
Good
yeah.
one. Can't go wrong with that one. All right. So we'll move on now, Pete, to so obviously you've been around the club for obviously a long time, and obviously been there when we were Seaball and now we're NBL 1. Can you just tell us a little bit about, I suppose, the journey from the Lady Miners to then the Rush as well? Just, I guess, like our elite teams and sort of their progression as the years have gone with you being the CEO.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing going right back, this is mid-'80s, so this is when I was still a volunteer with the organisation and just when I was starting into my sports management industry. So 1983 to 85, our biggest challenge was actually getting our senior men's and women's teams, which were just Ballarat at that point in time, into a state-based competition. So the journey hasn't changed, but in that era, Wednesday night basketball in Melbourne, Victorian State League as it was called, was very much about everyone went to Albert Park and played. So the old Albert Park, a little bit down the road from where MSAC is today. And we believe quite strongly that if we were entering into a state-based competition, the platform is not only to compete in that for athletes, but to showcase that level of sport in your own community. And the only way to do that is to have home and away. So right from day one, we entered those competitions at Division 2 and 3 level, but right from day one, we became very strong advocates and lobbyists for home and away. And despite the best endeavours of the organisers and managers of the competition at that time, ultimately over that next 2 or 3 years, we were able to convince all the other associations, including all the metro ones, that we had a fair case, and they voted overwhelmingly in the end to convert what was an easy ride for them into Albert Park to a full home and away and travelling. And I think what we see today with our sport, certainly in Victoria at NBL 1 level, it is the country and the regional centres that have those strong association bases and memberships and fans at home game. That's really made our sport in country Victoria. So that's probably a highlight in itself. And then just watching our teams evolve, and they both did it very differently. And I would say the girls did it a lot harder than the men. They didn't have the same support. They didn't have the same corporate structure. And they were, again, a separate entity initially. They didn't have the same financial resources. And when I look at achievements out of our program, I think the girls winning 8 consecutive premierships across what was the old VBL, Victorian Country League, through to their first introduction to Seaball was an astounding achievement and great testament to both the administrators, the separate administrators, and the coaches and players in that era. That probably ranks as nearly one of the most significant things that's happened in my time. Obviously closely followed by the men in winning their first championship events in 1989 when we were fortunate to win a Vic Country event, the Victorian State Championship, and also win the Seaball title in the same year. So that was probably a real highlight. That had never been done before, and I doubt if it's ever been done since. Yeah.
It's very special. I think, obviously, like chatting to a number of athletes that come to the Minor Dome and coaches as well, like when you walk down the corridor and you see, the Ray Warner medals and statues and photos in the hallway, and obviously all our past teams that have gone away to nationals and just representative team photos and things like that, it's really something special. And I think it's something really special that us as Basketball Ballarat have at our home, being the Minor Dome, which is now obviously, BSEC as well. But I think there's just something really special about the Minor Dome, and I guess like the heritage and the history that we have there. And we're so fortunate to have the history that we do, and we have a lot of pride in it as a club.
Yeah, look, definitely, and I think it's the quality of the people we've got, and you've mentioned some of those mainstays. And look, in the very early days, one of the reasons the Miners got going and the Lady Miners in that era was because people like Ray Warner and Robin Gull, Robin Marr at that time, had to leave Melbourne as teenagers, leave Ballarat as teenagers to go on to further their career. We really probably took a lead from that, and that's why the elite program started. But the quality of the people we've had through it, we've got people like Kim Castles, a great coach, a great player, now a great administrator within the association, Karen Ashby, a high quality national level player, but also someone who was just so willing to contribute to our own community. Eric Hayes came here as an import, has stayed and raised a family, and is now an integral part of our community and our education system in Ballarat. There's just been so many quality people through our program, men and women, that I think that history is something we should be very proud of and never forget. And that's probably one of the things I'm pleased in going into retirement. There's a lot of work to do in our history, and particularly in the 1986 year onwards with the elite programs. And one of my volunteer roles in retirement is going to be to really develop a much stronger past players and officials, alumni, really get people engaged with our program again, and not forget some of the people that have gone through it.
That's terrific. I love that, Pete. Love that. All right. We're now going to move on to a segment called Best Baller Moments. And this is presented by Peter Stevens, MG, proud vehicle sponsor of us here at Basketball Ballarat. So basically, Pete, I'm just after your top 3 favourite moments, basketball related, through your time here with us at Basketball Ballarat.
Yeah, well, the first one, and no one will remember this probably other than me and a handful of people, but this is the Eric Lowe era. This is actually winning the Victorian country title, Division 1 men in 1989. We were playing against Geelong.
Good win.
We were playing a team, 88, sorry. This is before our imports came in. We were playing a team that had American imports. We actually were playing just with our Australian content. A couple of seconds to go, Johnny Revels, I can remember the import, stepped over the end line as he inbounded the ball, and we got possession. Fortunately, it was a Geelong umpire who made the call. It was at the Minor Dome here, and we got possession and scored and won that country championship, which was the first time for a long time, but it really gave us that extra bit of motivation to go on. I think having the Commonwealth Games here, the regional rounds, while they weren't necessarily the best games, and they were, qualifying rounds, just seeing the pride that people in our city had walking into the venue as an international venue that had been dressed up remarkably well for the Commonwealth Games, it really, that injection of enthusiasm for the sport in 2006 was unbelievable, and just the pride people had in what happened. And look, and I got to say that that era, the era in beating Melbourne Tigers, I don't think in terms of a highlight or a game that stands out in my mind that I can go beyond the 89 championship where we beat Melbourne Tigers with a very strong NBL team on their home court in Melbourne, and that was a testament to not only to our coaches but also to the quality of the players. And just their dedication and their grit. They weren't the best players in the world, but geez, they played hard, and they wanted that more than Melbourne. And we got it on the night.
That's it. And I think for that game, there's obviously there's people like Glenn White, who are obviously still with us here at the club. And I remember before we went into game 2 against Geelong, the Youth League Division 1 finals, I remember Glenn had a bit of a talk to the boys. If we did win, how we would conduct ourselves and things like that. And it was just really special to have Whitey sort of just come in and sit to the boys and just, I don't know, to sort of explain to us all like how special this could actually be and what it meant for him winning and what it's going to mean for the town. And it just, I don't know, it did more than anything me and Daniel could have said just those couple of words from Whitey, they were so special.
And I think you're right, and I've seen a lot of that over the years in a whole variety of sporting opportunities. But I think it is how you conduct yourself when you win that really sets a benchmark. And I think that you don't get a chance to do it again. So if you are successful and you get that opportunity, make the most of it, but do it with dignity and do it with a bit of class. And I think that actually helps, the relationship you form with that particular group. And that doesn't matter whether it's an under-12 premiership or a SIB or NBL1 premiership. The relation and the bonds you form often with people that you've worked hard to achieve a goal, I think that's pretty special. And I really think that those guys who won the Youth League will have that same feeling when they get together in future years. And I think it's good for people like Glenn to reinvest in putting that information and that experience back into younger people.
Yeah, it was really special. It was really special. All right, Pete, we've got one more question. Actually, no, I've got the answer to these. They're meant to be your favourite employer and your least favourite employee. So your favourite is me, obviously, which I've got.
Yeah, obviously.
Definitely says favourite Ryan McKew, and its least favourite says Matt Newton. So that's no surprise there either. For least favourite, that's no surprise at all. So
I love them all.
All right, thank you so much, Pete, for jumping on the podcast today. It's been terrific.
Pleasure, Ryan, and best wishes to everyone for the future.